You guys might notice on your screen where it says Randy Edelman, the words DR, the letters DR are not there. You are not a doctor, but that was kind of the plan to begin with, was for you to have Dr. Randy Edelman, but somehow or another, the whole
Yeah,
pre-med thing.
no, but I did get it.
Oh, did you? Yeah, the
Of
honorary
course I did.
doctorate, right, from Cincinnati.
Yeah, and how about who I got it with? The other person, Coretta Scott
I
King.
saw that.
Not,
Yes.
yeah, very. That was, and I'm such a well, it's she's gone now, but I didn't get one picture. Boy, the
We
phone
always
thing
forget about
wasn't.
that, don't we, when we meet people? We always forget
Yeah,
about the
no, it's
picture.
like come on, this is a person. Okay, get a pic. No, the whole day, and it was great, and I, of course, was just really honored and happy. She just happened to be right. It could have been the other, I mean, there just were two people that year at that university, and that was her anyway. So I did get it. It wasn't the MD, but it was at least something.
Well, you can still put that there, though. So there you go.
Yeah.
But the plan originally was pre med, and you went to the University of Cincinnati. But if I'm reading this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you essentially started being successful with music because of a girl, King Records, and all of that. I'd love to hear your story behind that because it was kind of a girl at the
Oh,
time that shaped it, right?
oh yeah. Well, it's always come on.
It's always
It's
a girl.
always about a girl.
Yeah,
It's always about a girl. Sorry, everybody, whether that's that's cool to say these days, but it's always about a girl.
absolutely.
And when I was a kid, uh, music was not happening. Now, even though the Beatles started happening, all that stuff, the only thing that was important in New Jersey, in my town, if you want, was sports.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was it. Music was not. But then, as the years went on, and I started playing pop stuff, then I realized, hey, this is a good magnet. Because they kind of anyway. Okay, so I get to Cincinnati, yes, and well, there's a thing with King Records, which I'll just, but yes, I met this girl who was a singer in a band, uh, a band at a place called like the Mug Club. I know that sounds like it's made up from Animal House or something, but it's not. And I remember watching her singing with this rock and roll band. And then one day I was practicing in because it was a constant thing with me. I'm always searching for a piano to practice on. And I found one I think it was the law school at that university. And I found this great piano in the back of some lecture hall. And late at night I was practicing. And there's a girl sitting in the back of the room. And wouldn't you know it, it was the girl who sang in that band. She was just somebody sitting there. And she said, boy, you're really great. And it was her. I didn't want her. I didn't say oh, hey, I know who you are. You sing in that band at the Mug Club. But anyway, I said, you should record some of my songs. And it was like, really? Well, I didn't have any songs. None. Well, I did the next day.
Yeah.
And then this is how these things happen. So then so in the next month or something, I put these guys together from that band, and I wrote these songs, and we went into this little, I want to say 8-track, but I don't think it was an even 8-track. I think it was a 4-track. A little studio on the edge of a garbage dump in Cincinnati called King Records. And do you know who King Records was? Who recorded for them?
James Brown, I believe.
James Brown.
Bobby Bland was out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, yep.
And that's where my story outside all the classical stuff began, because these people saw me conducting these kids I bought from the school to play like strings on these songs that I wrote. And then they said, hey, you know what? At that time, people recorded, the closest to there was Chicago. That was big time. Or not Nashville, Memphis. And they would go there and put horns or strings on these tracks. And they saw this kid, I was about 16, and they said, you know what? We'll just give this kid a couple of bucks and we'll have him do it here with these, because it didn't really make any difference. They were good enough, these players, to play overdubs over these tracks. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of how I started. And by the time I got out of school, I had a bag full of these R&B tracks and stuff. And anyway, that goes back to the girl. I could get into that more, but I won't. But yeah, that's what it was. I just basically made up a story that I had these songs, and then I had to deliver.
Yeah.
I had to deliver a song or two.
It's really funny how many people or musicians' genesis story starts with a girl.
Come on.
Why'd you learn how to? Why'd you want to play guitar? Well, I wanted to get girls.
Right. Well, I never played the guitar. I just stayed here, But no, right, exactly. No, but it's well, and that like I said, that was it wasn't that it was late or it was happening, but it didn't get to be really cool. That the other thing was still that old fashioned sports thing was still the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
The football hero thing, which I wasn't about to do. But,
well, these circumstances were paramount too for you, because when you end up back in the New York, New Jersey area, you're essentially trying to get on board with April Blackwood, and you're using those tracks from King Records to help.
Right, I walked in, I walked in through a cousin of mine or something.
Yeah,
I mean when I realize and hear and talk and tell these stories, well, maybe he didn't get me an appointment. He couldn't, but he did. And I walk in and there's a guy named Tony Orlando behind the desk who's running April Blackwood. And you can't make this shit up.
I know.
And this is before that Tony Orlando and Dawn, but it was the same guy.
Yeah.
Great, terrific guy, wonderful guy. And he said, when you get out of school, come back here.
Yeah.
And that was how I, like I said, easier said than done.
And so from what I understand, even before you ever wrote a song, Tony Orlando was wanting to sign you to a publishing deal to write songs, right?
He did. He did. He gave me $50 a week.
Yeah.
That was my deal. $50 a week, April Blackwood, and I hadn't written a song. But he wanted me, he saw something, and he wanted me to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way he'd get me around, by signing me as a songwriter,
mm-hmm.
even though I wasn't a songwriter. Now, then I started writing songs,
And so there was I'd like to break up your career into different eras almost. And the first era really was obviously the 70s, and you had all of these records that you were putting out that you alluded to earlier. I don't want to use like a negative word for this, but these records were almost like a distraction for you, right? Just to get to a point where you can compose and write scores?
No. They were what was happening for me. In other words, I always say I hit this period after I got out of school and went there with the bag of stuff, and I played in a couple of shows on Broadway,
right?
Which was a great union gig. Now, this was all very fast. There wasn't years and years. We're talking literally months.
Okay.
And this thing happened with these singer-songwriters, and then the thing at April Blackwood happened, and I suddenly was in studios. So what the hell? You write something, you sing it. And I always say, even though it's an exaggeration, at that time, if you could write a good melody and carry a tune in the 70s, you could get a deal.
Right.
The singer, now, of course, that's an exaggeration. And if you had kind of the right head on your shoulders to know who and how to go about that, and what schmuck at some label may think you're halfway decent. So when I say that's what I was doing, no, it wasn't a distraction. I realized at the time, it's not like the reason I'm telling you this is I don't want to mislead you. Right. It wasn't like I was saying, no, you're a serious musician, which I was. You want to do this and that, and you'll do this for the time being. No, I was completely 100% on board into it when I was doing these records.
Is that because it was like kind of the traditional route, though? Because I know that your influences were more classical, right? From like
they were, but I wasn't making. I wasn't going to be a symphony conductor. Everything changed in Cincinnati with doing those tracks
right.
and pop music and R&B. So that was what I was doing at the time. I did start doing a few small films and stuff like that. So I had that interest, but I don't want to make it seem like those albums were like at the word you said, a distraction. No, I was dead serious about it because I realized this was the way forward.
Mhm.
I did the original around that time. People see this film, you probably don't even know about it, and they see this film and they see my name on it, and it's impossible because that's way before I started scoring. It's the Kennedy assassination film, the great one,
Mhm.
the real one, not JFK that John Williams did. This is far before that. I was a kid and I went down to Dealey Plaza. It's called Executive Action
Mhm.
with Robert Ryan, and if you based on a book by Mark Lane called Rush to
So I
Judgment.
know the film, I know the book. I did not know that you wrote the score for that. So that's very
Yes, and it's
interesting.
a trumpet and seven cellos and a piano, and it just so stuff like this. But it was very difficult, very pressured. I literally got sick. Dalton Trumbo wrote the script, very heavy Hollywood 10 characters. Too long a story as to how would that possibly Burt Lancaster go through a kid who's never done anything, but it did. Uh, and so I did a number of things during this period, and then did these albums, and then like having, you know, the Carpenters hear it and do some songs. That was like a stamp of approval on me
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
there were no sales. There was not, and then somebody else, and then a couple of great R&B singers and standard singers like Nancy Wilson doing songs and all kinds of people. And then this stuff started happening in England with me as an artist, those albums, but nothing here. Uh, and then when I was in England, some crazy thing happened, and a guy named Clive Davis saw me on Top of the Pops, and I sent him a song for Barry Manilow, and I had a #1 record with Weekend in New England, and things started happening. But it still didn't break out. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I wasn't. I still wasn't the most uh, Diane Warren. I wasn't the most recorded. So it was. It worked out for me perfectly if I could plan it, because I could never score movies had I one of those records of mine been a hit single.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that in this town that I'm in now, which I'm in Beverly Hills, in Hollywood. It doesn't work like that. So years later, when I got the big break, um, which you can't force and you can't play, no one knew who I was as far as being a musician, even though I had years of credits and stuff. As far as a film composer, I was a new guy. Luckily, I looked a little younger than I actually was.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm 105 now. You see, I don't look that age.
No,
But,
no, no.
so that's things worked out. So that just played themselves out a certain way. And I did those albums for many years before, I did film stuff, or I wrote MacGyver, or all that stuff, which is a whole other episode of my life. All these things sound almost humorous now,
Mhm.
but they weren't. They were like serious emotional things which led me into different areas.